Runic divination, broadly defined, is the interpretive practice of drawing meaning from the symbols of the runic alphabets associated with early Germanic-speaking societies, most notably the Elder Futhark. Although runes originated as writing systems rather than as a fixed divinatory code, they gradually came to be associated with secrecy, wisdom, ritual knowledge, and the symbolic interpretation of human experience. In the modern period, runic divination has acquired renewed prominence through spiritual revival movements, popular literature, digital communities, and the wider culture of alternative self-exploration. Its contemporary significance lies not merely in the continued use of ancient symbols, but in the way those symbols have been recontextualized to address modern concerns about identity, uncertainty, belonging, and meaning. An examination of runic divination therefore illuminates both the historical endurance of symbolic systems and the distinctive ways in which modern societies adapt older traditions to contemporary psychological, cultural, and spiritual needs. The earliest runic inscriptions are generally dated to approximately the 2nd century CE and are associated with Germanic communities across northern and central Europe. In their earliest known form, runes functioned as a script used for inscriptions on objects, memorial stones, weapons, and personal items. Modern scholarship does not support the simplistic assumption that the earliest runes were designed primarily for fortune-telling. Rather, the historical evidence suggests that they were first and foremost a writing system embedded in social, linguistic, and material practices. Nevertheless, the cultural status of writing in many early societies often extended beyond mere record-keeping, because literacy itself could carry an aura of prestige, secrecy, or restricted knowledge. Runes gradually became associated with mystery and specialized power. This development was reinforced by literary and mythological traditions, especially those preserved in Old Norse sources, in which Odin's acquisition of the runes is represented as an act of sacrifice, insight, and profound wisdom. Such narratives contributed to the later perception of runes as more than phonetic signs. They became symbols of hidden knowledge and metaphysical significance. At the same time, it is important to distinguish carefully between ancient evidence and modern reconstruction. While inscriptions, literary sources, and later traditions indicate that runes could be used in ritualized or magical contexts, the highly systematized methods of contemporary rune casting are largely products of modern interpretation. 19th and 20th century Romantic nationalism, occult scholarship, and neo-pagan revival movements all contributed to transforming runes into instruments of divination in the form commonly recognized today. As a result, contemporary runic divination should be understood as a hybrid phenomenon. It draws symbolic authority from the ancient past while also reflecting modern religious creativity, esoteric experimentation, and the search for alternative spiritual practices in secular societies. The contemporary resurgence of runic divination is inseparable from broader developments in modern spirituality and media culture. In recent decades, runes have circulated through books on symbolism and self-development, internet forums, video platforms, niche retail markets, and communities associated with pagan, heathen, and eclectic spiritual practice. In many of these settings, runes are presented not as deterministic instruments for foretelling a fixed future, but as prompts for contemplation, ethical reflection, or intuitive interpretation. This shift aligns with a wider movement in late modern society toward individualized spirituality, in which personal meaning-making is often privileged over institutional doctrine. The modern practitioner may therefore approach runes as a meditative device, a psychological mirror, a ritual tool, or a means of participating in an imagined relationship with ancestral traditions. The visibility of runes in contemporary culture has also been amplified by their appearance in fantasy literature, film, gaming, design, fashion, and social media aesthetics. In these contexts, runic symbols often signify antiquity, power, mystery, or authenticity, even when their historical meanings are simplified or transformed. Their migration into popular culture has made them widely recognizable far beyond explicitly religious communities. Consequently, runes now occupy a dual role. They function as objects of spiritual engagement for some users, while serving as aesthetic or symbolic motifs for others. This duality helps explain why runic divination has become a notable feature of modern cultural life, particularly among individuals who seek forms of spirituality that appear more personalized, experiential, and historically resonant than conventional religious institutions. One of the most significant effects of runic divination on modern society is its contribution to practices of introspection and self-interpretation. In an environment characterized by rapid communication, economic uncertainty, and sustained psychological pressure, symbolic systems often provide a framework through which individuals can slow the pace of decision-making and articulate otherwise diffuse concerns. A rune reading, whether conducted alone or with a practitioner, typically invites reflection on patterns, possibilities, and values rather than merely offering prediction in a narrow sense. For this reason, many contemporary users treat runic divination as a structured interpretive exercise that resembles journaling, guided reflection, or narrative reframing. Its social influence is therefore connected not only to religious belief, but also to the broader modern interest in mindfulness, emotional processing, and self-directed meaning-making. Runic divination also shapes modern society through its role in the construction of identity and community. For some practitioners, engagement with the runes forms part of a broader commitment to contemporary paganism or to reconstructionist approaches that attempt to reconnect with pre-Christian Northern European traditions. For others, the attraction is less confessional than symbolic. Runes may represent ancestry, mythic imagination, ethical resilience, or a non-institutional form of spirituality. In either case, the practice facilitates communal affiliation. Online discussion groups, workshops, publishing circles, and ritual gatherings have created networks in which participants exchange interpretations, establish shared vocabularies, and negotiate the boundaries between scholarship, belief, and personal experience. In this respect, runic divination illustrates a broader feature of modern culture, the reassembly of community around elective symbolic practices rather than inherited religious uniformity. Despite its appeal, the modern revival of runic divination also raises substantial intellectual and ethical concerns. Because the historical record surrounding early runic use is incomplete and often difficult to interpret, modern readers may project contemporary assumptions onto ancient material with undue confidence. This can result in oversimplification, commercial repackaging, or the circulation of historically ungrounded claims presented as inherited tradition. Moreover, certain runic symbols have been appropriated by extremist movements, thereby complicating their public reception and requiring greater care in their interpretation and display. These problems do not invalidate all contemporary engagement with runes, but they do demonstrate that symbolic revival is inseparable from questions of authority, historical responsibility, and the politics of cultural representation. A serious consideration of runic divination in modern society must therefore include both its constructive functions and the distortions that may accompany its popularity. The expansion of runic divination in modern society cannot be separated from media circulation and consumer culture. Books, card decks, carved rune sets, workshops, digital readings, and social media content have made rune practice broadly accessible to audiences who may have little prior familiarity with historical runology. This accessibility has undoubtedly contributed to the survival and visibility of runic symbolism. However, it has also encouraged forms of commercialization in which complexity is reduced in favor of easily marketable interpretations. In mass-mediated contexts, runes are frequently presented as universal keys to destiny, empowerment, or instant spiritual clarity. Such representations may attract interest, but they can also obscure the contested scholarship surrounding runic origins, meanings, and historical functions. For that reason, the ethical interpretation of runes in the present day requires a balance between openness and discipline. Respectful engagement benefits from attention to linguistic history, archaeology, comparative religion, and the distinction between documented evidence and speculative reconstruction. It also requires awareness that symbols do not remain unchanged when they move across time, media, and ideological communities. A more responsible modern practice of runic divination would therefore treat the runes neither as infallible relics of a fully recoverable past, nor as empty decorative forms available for unrestricted reinvention. Instead, they should be approached as historically layered symbols whose modern significance depends upon informed interpretation, intellectual humility, and cultural care. In conclusion, runic divination occupies a distinctive position within modern society because it joins historical imagination, symbolic interpretation, and contemporary spiritual experimentation. Although its present forms are shaped as much by modern revival and reinterpretation as by ancient precedent, its continued appeal is nevertheless significant. The practice provides many individuals with a language for reflection, a framework for identity formation, and a means of participating in communities organized around myth, ritual, and historical symbolism. At the same time, the popularity of runes demonstrates the tensions that arise whenever older traditions are revived in new social conditions. Meanings are expanded, simplified, contested, and commercialized. The broader effect of runic divination on modern society, therefore, is not limited to private spirituality. It also reveals how modern people negotiate the past, construct alternative forms of belonging, and seek significance through symbols that appear to bridge antiquity and the present. When approached critically and responsibly, the study of runic divination offers insight not only into a specific esoteric practice, but also into the cultural dynamics of modernity itself. Thank you for joining us today for Hidden Shadows. Please check back next week where we will continue our discussion of the runes and runic divination.